Ashwini Kumar has been working with us since decades and has worked tirelessly today to make this a successful event. It is indeed a privilege to have this session chaired by someone who truly needs no introduction, Professor Jean Reyes, visiting professor at the Department of Economics, Ranchi University, and honorary professor at the Delhi School of Economics. We are also fortunate to have with us two distinguished commentators for today's session, Professor Devnathan of IHD and Professor Nitya Rao from University of East Anglia, UK, who will share their insights following the lecture. I am Devika Modi, a faculty member of IHD Ranchi Center, and I am specially happy that this very significant lecture is taking place right here in my hometown, Ranchi. It's heartening to see such a large and engaged audience, both online and also in person, joining us for this important event. As many of you know, IHD's main office is based in New Delhi, while the Eastern Regional Center was established here in Ranchi in 2007. The center has since focused on key development issues in Eastern India, including tribal education, health, livelihoods, and broader human development concerns. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to sincerely thank all the participants for responding to our invitation and joining us today. This is a hybrid event, and we are thrilled to have over 800 people registered via Zoom. I mean, that's like we're overwhelmed with the response that we've received. The event is also being live streamed on the IHD's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/IHD India, all in capital. For those online, please feel free to share your questions and comments through Q&A tab on Zoom or via the comment box on YouTube. If we are not able to put you on Zoom as a participant, please come on YouTube live and you can see the event and you can also post questions there. We look forward to a truly engaging and thought-provoking session. Handing over the baton to you, Rana sir.
I welcome you all. First, Devika has apologized, and I too, as the director of the institute here, so I apologize again for the delay, which is undesirable but unavoidable. So I welcome you all. And before that, I thank you all. Thank you, the speaker, the chair, the commentators, all you have come, and all my colleagues who have made it happen, who have organized everything so beautifully. I will briefly introduce the speaker and chair and commentators. So I'll change the order. I am doing it on age seniority. So Professor Devnathan, I begin with him, is a social scientist and whose areas of work spread from poverty, inequality, gender, caste, and tribe, economic history. He is a senior visiting fellow, Institute for Human Development, New Delhi. His recent books include Reverse Subsidies in Global Monopsonic Capitalism, Witch Hunts, Culture, Patriarchy, and Structural Transformation, GVCs and Development in Asia, Challenges of Upgrading and Innovation, Labor in Global Value Chains in Asia, and Knowledge and Global Inequality since 1800. Now, Jean Reyes, visiting professor at Ranchi University, is a development economist, the Cholawala economist, as the elites call him. He has been influential in guiding social research in a more meaningful and productive way, and has impacted economic and social policy making of the country in many ways. He works both as a researcher and an activist on the issues of hunger, famine, gender equality, child health and education, and employment and social security. He has been involved in authoring and editing several books, including Hunger and Public Action. Some are jointly authored, and some are authored by him, some are edited by him. The Political Economy of Hunger, India, Economic Development and Social Opportunity, Indian Development, Selected Regional Perspectives, The Economics of Famine, War and Peace in the Gulf, Testimonies of the Gulf Peace Team, India, Development and Participation, and Uncertain Glory, India and its Contradictions, and Sense and Solidarity, Jholawala Economics for everyone. Now, Professor Achin Chakraborty, the speaker, is professor of economics at the Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata, where he held the position of director for 10 years. A rigorous practitioner of the capability approach, Professor Chakraborty's area of interest ranges from education, health, labor inequality, and development discourse. He is a regular contributor to several academic journals and popular newspapers and periodicals. Books authored and edited by Professor Chakraborty include Limits of Bargaining, Capital, Labor and the State in Contemporary India, Revisiting Inequality, Theoretical and Methodological Advances with Empirical Examples from India, Changing Contexts and Shifting Roles of Indian State, New Perspective on Development and Dynamic, Capital in the East, Reflection on Marx, etc. Nitya Rao is a professor of Gender and Development, School of Global Development at the University of East Anglia, UK. Before joining the academia, she had worked extensively among the rural population in many parts of India. She has been working in Jharkhand for the last 30 years and has contributed in many ways to develop and organize Adivasi women's groups in Santhal Pargana and other parts of Jharkhand. Aside from teaching, she is intensely involved in the field of research and writing on the issues of gender, migration, poverty, inequality, education, and land rights. She is a prolific writer and has been contributing several prominent journals. Her books include Good Women Do Not Inherit Land and Quest for Identity, Gender, Land, and Migration in Contemporary Jharkhand. So I won't take much of time. So we have to go for the main event now. So I thank you all and welcome.
I would also request all of you to please put your phones on silent mode so that there's no disturbance.
Thank you, Kumar, and welcome everybody. Today is a happy day for IHD, the Institute for Human Development, which is getting a new lease of life under the leadership of its new director, Kumar Rana, who has brought new enthusiasm to the entire team. As you can see from the fact that the hall is full, there are people standing in the corridor, and on top of that, we have hundreds of people viewing online. This is really a first for the Institute. We are also fortunate that Professor Achin Chakraborty has agreed to give this first lecture in the series, the IHD ERC Seminar Series. The topic of his talk is Economics and Politics of Public Policies for Human Development in India. Very interesting and captivating title. I will ask him to speak for about 30 to 40 minutes maximum. And then we will have brief comments from Nitya Rao and Devnathan, and then hopefully sometime after that for open discussion and any questions that may come, including from the online viewers. So without further delay, I'll ask Achin to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zom. I'd like to thank Institute for Human Development for giving me this opportunity to present my thoughts here today. And it's a great honor. I take it as a matter of great honor, and particularly because, you know, Zondres is chairing this session, and also Nitya Rao and Devnathan. So all the great scholars who I admire a lot for their work, scholarly work. So I'm a bit diffident because I have to present, you know, in front of all these great scholars. So, and I must thank the director, Mr. Kumar Rana. He's a friend of mine for long. And so it's a great opportunity to be here in Ranchi and be present in front of all of you. And it's a great opportunity. Thank you very much. Let me start off the discussion with this. The title of my talk is Economics and Politics of Public Policies for Human Development in India. My basic training is in economics, And then over time, I moved into what is called development studies, which is no longer economics. It's a interdisciplinary way of looking at development issues. And the two institutes that I served over my career, first Center for Development Studies in Trivandrum, and then Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata, in Kolkata. And both of these institutes, they are devoted to development studies. So broadly, even though some of the ideas that I throw up here come from basic economics, but I move on to the political issues, and particularly the issue of normative versus political, or normative and political, if I might say. Let me start off with this normative. And I mean, in economics, we make a distinction between normative and positive. So normative, usually we say that, what ought to be done. That's the normative question. How, poverty should be assessed, how human development achievements should be assessed. So those kind of issues, actually, we call them normative questions, normative research questions. And many researchers actually spend the time on this, just the evaluative aspect of it. But we know that in research, we don't stop at evaluation. We also do what might be called explanatory studies, where we try to explain different, the phenomena. Now, when we get into this explanatory mode, then we draw on different social sciences, maybe economics, maybe politics, political science, and et cetera, et cetera. So let me start with this distinction between normative and what might be called positive analytic kind of analysis, okay? So the first slide, actually, I quoted from this Sustainable Development Goals. Let me read out the draft document that, that was accepted by these countries. We are announcing today 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 associated targets, which are integrated and indivisible. Never before have world leaders placed common action and endeavor across such a broad and universal policy agenda. We are setting out together on the path towards sustainable development, devoting ourselves collectively to the pursuit of global development and of win-win cooperation, which can bring huge gains to all countries and all parts of the world. Now, when you read this particular passage from their draft, you wonder that, how can we achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 associated targets just with good wishes and win-win? Now, with good wishes, can we achieve these 169 targets? The question is that as scholars, as researchers, we ask the first question that, are they consistent with each other? Are there issues of conflict? Because they are expecting that there must be cooperation. Now, cooperation cannot come in vacuum. Are there possibilities of conflict among these goals or not? So that's the first question that came to my mind when I looked at this write-up. So then I wonder this. I start asking this question: that how relevant are SDGs to our social research? So I'm looking at SDG not from the point of view of these policymakers, where you have a set of targets and you are supposed to achieve those targets. I'm not asking that question. I'm asking that from the social research point of view, like us, how relevant are SDGs to social research? My take on this is areas encompassed by SDGs are already areas in which academics are active, such as poverty, gender equality, environmental sustainability, and so on. But the pitfalls of tagging them to an explicit SDG agenda, it looks like that, it gives an impression of, something which is cast in stone kind of thing. That means whatever research that you have been doing, then you have to reorient the whole thing just to keep the targets in mind. Now, this is something that as a researcher, I feel uncomfortable about, because I have been doing research, but all of a sudden, if you say that, how can we achieve this, this particular target in the next 6 years or so? I have no answer. I don't know how to do that. But we continue our research. Posed in an overwhelmingly normative frame, and that's the point that I'm making, that most of these goals and most of these targets are framed in a normative way, normative frame, steeped in a kind of vague holism, ends in a list of things that ought to be done without delving deep into the underlying conflicts and contradictions. Now, that's the main point that I'm going to elaborate on. That whenever you have a set of targets, like 17 targets, 17 goals and 169 targets, there must be some conflicts among the targets and among the goals. And are we explicit about that? Are we explicitly recognizing those conflicts and the possibilities or impossibilities of them? So it creates some impression that they form a seamless whole and could be achieved only if the international community had been sensitized about the importance of setting such goals. As if that as soon as you set the goals and bring all those country heads and sign the treaty, sign whatever convention, and as if they go back to their country and then start doing achieving those targets. Now, so this is something which, I mean, this is the kind of lack of comfort that I want to share with you. Basically, there are two kinds of conflict I can think of. So it's an incompatibility between the normative goals and the systemic or structural logic that connects a policy action to its outcome. Let me elaborate on that. Now, when you expect some kind of policy action, and that policy action is supposed to lead to certain outcome, then what comes in between is that, certain structural logic. Now, that structural logic, in fact, because of our research, we come to know about the complexity of that structural logic. So it's not just, you set the normative goals and you completely ignore the structural logic, and one fine morning, you see that the goals have been achieved. It's not like that. If the normative standpoint is not sensitive to the positive analytic aspects of the social phenomena in question, then policies driven by such normative concerns may end up in unintended consequences. Now, this is one of the main points that I want to flag off. I can give you numerous examples from our policy, policy documents. Many of the policies, you see that they are based on apparently some kind of evidence base. We call evidence-based policies. Now, evidence-based policies, even when we talk about evidence-based policies, sometimes we have seen that even the evidence is sometimes it's selectively chosen. We are selective, and then on the basis of that evidence, we talk about the policy. Even evidence is selectively chosen. So that's one thing. Now, just to give you an example that, recently, I mean, this is not directly human development as such in West Bengal. Suddenly the government announced that from now on, all the reserve forests and, so there won't be any entry fee there. So anyone can go in without paying any price for that. Now, this is something that we feel disturbed about because, it's many of these reserve forests, they are maintained on the basis of certain amount of revenue generated from that, from that collection, from the visitors. And second, in economics, in basic economics, this what we call rationing by pricing. Now, rationing by pricing is a well-accepted form of rationing in economics, provided that is not a what might be called basic need. So rationing by pricing in this particular case, I think it's very much justified because here we are talking about conservation or preservation of nature. So this is just one example where, suddenly we see these policies without really backing off any kind of basic economic thinking. And even the politics of it is not very clear-cut, because it apparently it looks like populism, but just this kind of policy intervention cannot re-elect the politicians. I mean, there are other things which actually come into play. So I think it's a wrong perception about even the wrong perception about what is popular. So I think that that is something which is important. Now, I'm not against populist policies. What I'm saying is that there are many instances where so-called populist policies actually are good for people. Why? Because there is a what might be called incentive compatibility for the politicians. That means the politicians feel that this is good for me and this is good for people. Now, when these incentives actually are compatible to each other, then actually that works. But you can think about policies where, politicians have no incentive to implement that, then you can go on talking about that, but, without the desired outcome. Anyway, let me move on to this. Sometimes the conflicts are inherent in the nature of the goals themselves. Like what? Like, let me give you one example. A concern for social justice now requires redistribution to the poor, but such redistribution also entails increased consumption vis-a-vis resources to be available for investment, say in something in green technology and things like that. So you have to set aside resources for investment in green technology, but that could be used for your poverty alleviation programs. Now, we need to do this study that a limited resource, how best it can be utilized, keeping in mind the goals. So here, in fact, the goals of justice and the goals of sustainability may apparently come in conflict, but actually may not be. So, that requires some kind of research, some kind of understanding of things. So quite often we see that, so-called this, development versus equity, that kind of notion people brings in. But apparently there seems to be a conflict, but there is actually no conflict in many cases. So this is something that we elaborate on. We will give you some examples. Just to summarize this, wrong policy action may be due to, one, lack of understanding of the ethical importance of the right policy. Two, lack of understanding of behavioral responses of various agents. And three, lack of incentives to adopt the right policy. See? So the first one, lack of understanding of the ethical importance of the right policy, entire normative literature, including Amartya Sen's, that is exactly what is done. That is, the ethical importance of certain things like capability, for instance, capability, expansion of capability as the goal of development. So development as capability expansion, deprivation as, or poverty as capability deprivation. Now, all these notions, in fact, strengthen the first point. The first point is that lack of understanding of the ethical importance of the right policy. So even the policy makers, they may be convinced about the normative aspect of it, that is, understanding of the ethical importance of the policy, but they may not understand the second one, that is, lack of understanding of behavioral responses of various agents. That means if I do X, what happens to Y? What would be the outcome of that? Now, these behavioral responses of agents, as a response to every policy action, we need to study and we need to understand that. Otherwise, it may go wrong. I can give you a couple of examples on that. So we need an explanatory framework. And that explanatory framework, to some extent, economics can provide sometimes. But yeah, so I'll give you some examples. and behavioral model of actions of different agents. That means how different agents behave in response to certain things. Let me give you one example. I mean, one recent example on which we worked in West Bengal. This is about this early marriage of girls. You know, West Bengal is, if you look at NFHS 5, there's girls getting married before they attain 18 years. It's one of the highest, 42%, 41.6%, which is the highest among all the states. Now, you might wonder, why is it so? In West Bengal, how come that, you know, these girls are getting married before attaining 18? Now, then we started probing that. Then we saw that, I mean, of course, it is widely known that the government of West Bengal introduced some conditional caste transfer program in 2013. So now we have, you know, more than 10 years. So now it's time to sort of look at that, you know, the impact of that. Now, apparently, if you look at NFHS 5, which is 1921 data, even within these 7-8 years, you don't find much effect on that. That means a conditional caste transfer program, we have evidence from other countries, including Bangladesh, that a conditional caste transfer program does have positive effect on girls' enrollment and even the age at marriage. But in West Bengal, it didn't work. The same conditional caste transfer program, it didn't work. Then we looked at, actually it was commissioned by the state government. I mean, the state government is also worried about it. And they shared this data on Konyashi, I mean that conditional caste transfer program, which is called Konyashi. And we looked at the disbursement of Konyashi amount and all. You see, those who are enrolled in class 10 and 11 and getting Konyashi money, it's almost the match. In other words, it's not the disbursement that is inefficiently done. It is reaching out to the target group, that is those who are still in educational institutions and have not got married before 18. They will receive that. So that part is okay. So the design is okay. The implementation is okay, but you don't see the desired result. Now, why? Then you start wondering why. Then I look at boys' dropout rates. It's not girls. So then I spoke to this principal secretary of Women and Child Development Department, and then I told her that this is not exclusively about your department. It's the Department of Education. You should actually work with them. It's not that your department is concerned that early marriage. So in other words, this early marriage of girls is structurally linked to very high rate of boys dropout from schools. Now, if you just do it in isolation with a conditional caste transfer and target the girls, forgetting the boys, then you miss out the complete thing, that, you know, the behavioral responses of people, and I mean the girls and the parents. What is it? Because boys drop out from schools, it's one of the highest in West Bengal now. What do they do after that? Sometimes they're migrant labor. Sometimes they join this informal sector, very low wage anyway. So after a couple of years, if they go to Kerala or Bangalore or somewhere else, they save some money, come back, get married. So the boys getting married at 21 or 22 years of age. And what would be the prospective bride for them? Not college educated, definitely. So in other words, through the marriage market, there's a kind of downward pressure on the girls that, you know, there's going beyond 11 years of education or 10 years of education. It's not worth it, because ultimately you have to get married. And the labor force participation in West Bengal, female labor force participation in West Bengal, again, one of the lowest. Now, if you combine this information, then only it starts getting clearer, right? So now the policymaker would ask, no, we have done this, 2013, we started this industry, but it must be working. So they are saying that it must be working. So your data may be wrong, and et cetera, et cetera. So now we realize that, yeah, I mean, even if there is evidence from other countries, but still the same policy may not work here if the structural conditions are very different. Now here, it's a very different kind of structural conditions that, well, because of the job market and the boys' prospect of getting employment, et cetera, and the managed market particularly. So the managed market actually works a kind of, it has a dampening effect on girls' education in this particular case. So this is an example where you see that, how complicated it can get. It's just not a matter of setting target and implementing the policy. Okay. So, I mean, I'm going to skip some of these ideas that I thought that but because of lack of time. Now, if we come to this health and education, the issue that comes up is that to what extent this market can take care of this. So this market, non-market debate, all the time, we see that it goes on, market, non-market debate, right? So, and again, people take normative position on to what extent, we should depend on market. And so the critique of market, they say that, this education is being, privatized and, we are now relying on market, et cetera, et cetera. But we have been witnessing this public-private working at the same time. So have we really studied this public-private as a mix? So when you talk about health system, now health system is not just the government health system. So government health system is one part of it, and the private healthcare is another. Now, so in a public-private mix, how the public policy works through this, kind of complex of this private-public mix, that has to be studied. Like what? You see that, I mean, long back, Albert Hirschman had this idea of this exit voice, right? And this exit voice, that is, when the middle class actually exiting from the public facilities, then the voice option within this actually comes down. Now you don't see that the parents are vocal about the quality of government schools in West Bengal, even though 90% of the children are going to government schools. It's strange. So 90% of the children are going to government schools. It's one of the highest again. I mean, very few actually are going to private schools in West Bengal, particularly in rural areas. 90% are going to government schools, but you don't see any voice in terms of the quality deterioration in government schools. Now that's because, I mean, one explanation would be Albert Hirschman kind of explanation. That is just because the vocal middle class actually have left that sector. So, the rest of the people, they don't have the power to raise their voice. I mean, maybe. And that happens in, elsewhere as well, that, as the middle class actually exit from the public hospitals, government hospitals, then again, the voice part actually gets weakened. So the quality improvement through voice, that option is gone. So middle class keep on exiting that. Now there's a very apparently funny thing is happening in West Bengal now. I think every other state, they will face this. That is, the private school parents whose children are going to private school, they are now actually demanding a cap on the tuition fee. They're demanding that the tuition fees should not be raised every year in the private school. Now, see the paradox. Actually, they could have done it in the government school and saying that, look, you have all the qualified teachers, why don't you teach? But instead of that, you sort of force yourself to exit, and now you're in private schools of dubious quality. And in that private school, the only concern of you is that the tuition fee is not affordable anymore. It's too much for the middle class and lower middle class. So the point here is that, you see, it's a very perverse kind of boys exit kind of thing that we observe here, right? That is the middle class, lower middle class, they sort of force themselves to put their children in the private school. And now they're demanding that private schools must not raise their tuition fees. Now, the question is that, there is a basic economics of that. The economics is that what is called the, long back, William Baumol had a paper on this issue, that it's called the cause disease of services, which means that, just think about it, you have to go on paying the teachers. Now, teachers would actually look for a salary which is comparable to other sectors, right? Now, other sectors they have the possibility of raising productivity fast, right? Think about telecommunication, think about something else. So there the productivity rises fast, but in education and health, productivity doesn't rise because one doctor can treat only 50 patients per day or something, right? So the productivity cannot be raised in these sectors like healthcare and education. One teacher can teach only for rises fast. Now, this is a crucial problem in the market for services. Now, we never realized that this market for services actually it has inherent bias towards rising cost. And the cost will go on rising and no one can afford to pay that price eventually. So that's why this demand for that. And now we see that demand for, even for hospital services, private hospital services. Now, again, there is a huge pressure on the government, state government, to put a cap on their hospital services as well. And many of the hospitals, they're saying that it's not viable at all. So you see that our understanding of public-private mix, I think we should now push our research towards that in the presence of private, what should the public authorities do? In the presence of rising private, what should the public policymakers do? I mean, they cannot just afford to remain confined to their own health department, to their own education department. Government as a steward or stewardship role, if you think about government's stewardship role, then the government has to steward the entire sector, including private sector. How do they do that? That's a separate question. We don't have much time to discuss that. Now, the last point that I do about the politics thing, so I think I'll stop because I have already, I think, how much time do I have? Okay, so maybe I'll stop in 2-3 minutes. Joe? 5 minutes? Okay. Yeah. So let me just, there are quite a few actually policy situations which, I have a table which is interesting. Just to give you, just show this table later on. Yeah, this one. You see that this is a very simple table which gives you some familiar indicators of schooling. It's a primary schools. It's all India. So over time, what you can see is that the percentage of single teacher schools has got, kind of, and even later on, it's around 10%. Percentage of schools with student classroom ratio greater than 30, it has come down sharply. Percentage of schools with PTR, people-teacher ratio greater than 30, it has come down sharply. But look at the last column. The last column, percentage of schools having enrollment less than 50, it has gone up. The point is that you look at the averages. So the average indicators, like people-teacher ratio, like, student classroom ratio, all are coming down, that's fine. So now classes are not overcrowded. Now, you don't have too many single classroom schools, but what you have is that, the enrollment is less than 50. There are many schools where enrollment is just 5, 7, 12, 13, like that. But you have teachers. So the government has a huge task to reallocate this. But then it comes in conflict with our Right to Education Act 2009. Right to Education Act says that there must be a primary school within 1 kilometer. Now, how do they reconcile the two? It's extremely difficult to reconcile the two. A school within 1 kilometer and your enrollment is less than 20, you have to have at least 3 teachers to teach in 5 classes, but you can't afford to do that, right? So this is that, I mean, apparently it looks like a conflict between what we call efficiency and equity, but it's not so. I mean, it's a basic resource allocation problem. And this resource allocation problem one has to confront, in the government sector. So this is the last conflict that I spoke about. So in spite of, so that's the point, that in spite of the fact that we have been spending almost like, 8,000 crore or something on education, but still you see that, these kind of anomalies are going on. But apart from that, we have this huge quality issue. I'm not getting the quality issue. So last point about this, maybe the politics of it. Yeah. So from normative to political. While the normative discourse on rights and capabilities enhances our understanding of the interconnections between the two, and in the process highlights the importance of what is called discursive practice. In other words, this capability language itself, if you push it, and now the governments are accepting this capability language. So it's a discursive practice, which is also important. It throws very little light on how one can draw on the political practice. That is, the actual political dynamics in a specific country context that opens up or constrains the possibilities of rights realization. Now think about it. None other than Zodres is here. Think about their PUCL, the initial PIL that they made in Supreme Court, and the right to food and all this right to food campaign and the Right to Information Act. In all these right-based approaches in the first decade of this century, we observe that, and then they are legislated. So by 2010 or 11, we have quite a few legislations on right-based approach. Now, that right-based approach, in fact, shifted the discourse to some extent. It gave us the instrument, gave us the power to actually fight and changing the discourse. The discursive practice actually changed with this right-based thing. But after that, what happens is that even the Right to Education Act, you see that one after another policy may come up. You see that, clearly they violate some of the rights. So in other words, rights realization, as Amartya Sen said, that rights realization is one of the important functionings. And so if you're deprived in that functioning, which means that your capability, your capability set is smaller than otherwise. So in other words, this rights realization and how these rights are realized, that itself is an important question now. Because after the legislations, now it's important to see that how this, and then the politics actually plays a crucial role. So, there is a parallel literature in political science also, like in Shapiro, the State of Democratic Theory. They made a distinction between normative political theory and what might be called positive political theory. That means that, how democracy should function and how the actually democracies function. So this normative and positive analytic, this distinction is not only the economist distinction, but it is also political science. They make this distinction, like for instance, Shapiro, the State of Democratic Theory. The last point I would say that, we wrote, it's a politics and data. I'm jumping actually. So this is an important point, that politics and information data. We wrote a piece in Economic and Political Weekly the year before, 23, I guess, my colleague Simantini Mukhopadhyay and myself. The title of that was The Politics of Child Undernutrition Data in India. There, the point that we raised is this, that is, child undernutrition now has been a very contested terrain now. This contestation is going on. Zodres, in fact, contributed long back, 20, 2013, I guess, in EPW, that piece after Arvind Panagaria wrote a piece in EPW, and you probably don't remember that. You remember that? Yes. So this, in 2013, Arvind Panagaria raised this question first. That is, the child undernutrition standard that we are maintaining, this is our WHO standard, and we should have country-specific standard. Why? Because, you know, all this genetic factor and this and that. And it was actually demolished by at least 6 or 7 people, including Zodres, and that point was demolished. But again, it resurfaced now. And now, in fact, there's, what is that, National NAAC? Yeah, yeah. No. No, they have given this NAAC. You know, after that Global Hunger Index came up and these controversies, and then they came up with a draft and said that, you know, Global Hunger Index is overwhelmingly giving importance to child undernutrition. What about other dimensions of hunger? But because it is giving too much importance of child undernutrition, that's why Global Hunger Index ranking is not coming down for India. Now, that was their main point. And then immediately they shifted to this point that, you know, these child undernutrition standards are wrong. So they have now given this huge project basically to collect information on height and weight of children of different social groups, etc., throughout India. And on the basis of that, they will come up with some standard. But the point here is that WHO standard, if you're familiar with that, how did they come out? They did survey it's a purposive survey in 6 different countries, including India. And India, they took the sample from South Delhi, urban, you know, well-fed children. So urban, well-fed children, that's the standard. Now, if that is the standard, why do you object to that? Because everyone would strive for that urban South Delhi children, their nutritional standard, I would also like to see my child achieve that standard, right? So that should be taken as a standard, and that is WHO standard. But their point is that no, because it's a very biased, because, you know, you are focusing only on the privileged, so it's not the, you know, it is not representative of Indians. Now, what is this representative of Indians? If 99% are undernourished, then would you like to set your standard from the representative sample of Indian children? So this is the kind of discourse now it's going on. So what I'm saying is that in spite of the fact that all the scholars, including Zodres and Devanathan and Nitya Rao, so all these scholars, they are talking about many of these things, that how this politics actually, you know, gets in our way of making better policies. But I'm saying that even if we set aside the policies, but sometimes even the basic thing is not being fulfilled, we are not looking into even the evidence. Sometimes even we are not even looking at the evidence and immediately jump to these policy conclusions without looking at the evidence. And last point that I want to again emphasize, that which I started with, is that there's a lot to offer, you know, to this discourse, you know, from whatever discipline you are from. And I'm from economics discipline, and quite a few examples I can give you that the so-called unintended consequences we should be sensitive about. That means, you know, a particular policy X, whether X leads to Y or not, that depends entirely on how the actors respond to that policy intervention. And that knowledge to some extent comes from some economic model, some economic knowledge, and that is not to be thrown away. So I stop here, and yeah, now please.
Thank you, Achin. Very stimulating talk with plenty of ideas. I'm sure there are lots of questions, but I think we'll first take brief comments from Nitya and Devanathan, starting with Nitya.
Thanks so much, Achin. Really enjoyed the talk, very provocative and very stimulating. So I guess just 1 or 2 comments I wanted to make, because you touched on that. And of course, my main
क्या तुम हिंदी बोल लेती हो, थोड़ा थोड़ा हिंदी भी बोलो।
हाँ जरूर जरूर, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। तो सिर्फ ये जेंडर पॉइंट में थोड़ा सा हिंदी में मुश्किल होगा, बट मिलाकर हाँ। So the point that you raised, about gender and how it is often focused on only on girls or only on women. So I think this is something teaching gender now for many years, that we keep trying to emphasize that this is a relational concept between men and women, boys and girls. But of course, this focus remains. I was particularly alarmed, very similar to your example, by a recent UNFPA study, which shows that in the context of climate change, that gender-based violence or intimate partner violence in sub-Saharan Africa, but also in South Asia, is going to increase by more than double by 2050. And what is the reason? Once you start going into the reasons, it's very similar to what you said, that, with climate change, production or productivity may be affected. Men are typically supposed to be providers. They're supposed to earn, provide for the family. And what in gender studies we call as crisis of masculinities, that the men are not able to perform their role. They have to take out their frustration. They have to find some way of expressing their frustration of not being able to do what society expects them to do. And as a result, it leads to an increase in violence. This becomes even more if actually in today's context, rural areas mein aap dekh lijiye that through livelihood mission, through lot of support, targeting women, women self-help groups, targeting women, actually women have become more productive. And पुरुषों को वो गांव में रह के वो कुछ superfluous हो गए. They are not able to do anything. So when I started work in Jharkhand 30 years ago in Dumka, none of the men were migrating. Only women were going to West Bengal once or twice a year for paddy transplanting and harvesting. Today, you go to any village that only women are there. Men have all gone to Tamil Nadu, Bangalore, Kerala, Karnataka, Mumbai. And I see this as the same phenomenon, that when we are talking about gender equality, actually, we are taking a very, and of course, for women, one could argue many other things of why policy making is so focused on women. That's another question. That when we have men and women in our society, but policy making is focusing on women as the vehicle for development, whether it is through SHGs, whether it is through school management committees, mothers committees, health, all the underpaid so-called voluntary workers like Ashas, Sahiyas, Anganwadi workers. Now, today I was at the Jharkhand State Livelihood Promotion Society, and बहुत किस्म के महिलाओं का unpaid work, वो सेतु सखी, पशु सखी, पोषण सखी, कृषि सखी, wash sakhi, totally making them work very hard in the panchayat, going from village to village in the hot sun with targets, but with no compensation or very little compensation. कल 2 दीदी मुझको बोली दुमका में कि हमको पहले ये वॉश सखी के नाते 10,000 रुपया पर मंथ मिलता था, अब घट के 6,000 रुपया हो गया, but काम नहीं घटा. So I think there are real, very serious issues in what you're saying about the economics and politics of policy making. I think of targeting of women and assuming that women's labor can be exploited, that they can be underpaid. But at the same time, you're paying them something and there are no jobs being created for men. So men are all moving out, or there is increase in gender-based violence, separation, abandonment, all these kinds of social trends. So I think that's one point that I wanted to make. And the second point, very briefly, based on some of the work that we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think probably Jean will say more on this because it is on the theme of food security and nutrition. Actually, the NFSA, which you referred to, just aapne reference kiya, it offers that there can be a wide basket of foods that can be given to local people. Unfortunately, what has happened is that it is only rice and wheat, and also from the last 2 years, only fortified rice and wheat. And of course, we know there's been, including, I think, your movement, the public health resource network, many people have been saying that, especially for tribal or Adivasi communities who may have sickle cell and other kinds of diseases, that fortified rice actually nuksandayak hai. It's not really benefiting. So I think one of the things that I've been working on more recently has been on showing the efficacy of local foods or of indigenous foods, which in our education system and schools are treated as jungly or backward, and people feel very ashamed. महिलाओं को पुरुषों बहुत शर्म आता है बोलने के लिए कि हम जंगल से तोड़ के लेके आ गए, या कोई सब्जी साग खेत से collected foods or uncultivated foods. So they all want to say that we want to purchase from the market. So that gives pride, similar to your public school, private school. If it is a marketable commodity, there is status attached to it. If it is a collected or a so-called wild commodity, which may be very nutritious, there is no status attached to it. So we actually did a documentation in Santhal Parganas of local foods and also got the efficacy tested by nutritionists to show that these are actually, like the local saag is much more nutritious than palak, which is distributed by Agriculture Department in terms of Poshan Vatikas and other schemes for improvement of nutrition. But there is a huge resistance to acknowledging that local foods can actually serve the needs of people, and right from top to down. So I think that's another aspect of the policy making, which is of the politics, which is not only not taking account of evidence or economics, but there is something else as well in terms of, vote bank politics, the issues of democracy, the need to prepare for elections and so on, that forces people to go into particular channels in terms of policy. So I think I'll just stop with that, and later on in the discussion, I'm sure there'll be other questions, but thank you very much for your talk. It really stimulated a lot of ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Achin for putting so many issues before us. मैं एक सवाल पर बोलूंगा, ये राजनीति का सवाल है कि ऐसे ये परिवर्तन क्यों हो रहा है, उसके राजनीतिक कारण क्या है। अचिन ने ये बताया है कि पहले जो एक प्रकार के उन्होंने अपने स्लाइड में दिया है सप्लाई साइड प्रोविजनिंग, मीनिंग शासन की तरफ से या तो वो एजुकेशन का हो या हेल्थ का हो, तो उनकी तरफ से उसको तैयार करना और लोगों को मिलना, वो एक अधिकार होता है, होने की बात होती है, जिसके लिए जॉन्ड्रेस ने बहुत ज़्यादा काम किया है कि ये अधिकार है और इसीलिए सरकार को इसका प्रोविजनिंग या तैयारी इसका सप्लाई कराना होगा। ये एक प्रकार का तरीके है। दूसरा है कि मार्केट में ये चलेगा, जैसे आजकल जो हेल्थ सिस्टम होता है, और हम आपको थोड़ा सा मदद करेंगे पैसे उसमें मार्केट में जाने के लिए, कि जो लोग क्या है अभी ये जो हेल्थ स्कीम जो बना है, जिसके लिए हमारे जैसे जो बुजुर्ग लोग हैं, वी आर सपोज टू गेट इट फॉर फ्री, मगर ये नहीं कि सरकार की तरफ से होगा। सरकार के जो हॉस्पिटल है वो उतना ही खराब है जैसे पहले था, खास करके रूरल एरियाज में, मगर आप चले जाइए जो अच्छे क्वालिटी के हॉस्पिटल है, उसके लिए हम आपको कुछ पैसे देंगे। मैंने अधिकार से लेकर अभी आप लाभार्थी बन गए हैं, वी आर अ बेनिफिशियरी, यू आर नॉट एन राइट होल्डर एनी मोर, आप अधिकारी नहीं है। तो इसका राजनीति क्या है, ये इसीलिए चल रहा है कि यहाँ भी लाभार्थी की बात इसीलिए चल रहा है कि हमारे देश में अभी तक ये इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम खत्म नहीं हुआ है, इसलिए उनको लड़ना पड़ता है वोट के लिए। तो वोट के लिए तो जब वो दूसरे पार्टी के लोग बोलेंगे तो बोलते हैं ये तो फ्री भी है, ये रेवड़ी है, और जब हम बोलेंगे तो बोलेंगे ये तो विकास के लिए है। तो इस प्रकार की राजनीति में थोड़ा बहुत फायदा हो जाता है, क्योंकि ये सब स्कीम्स भी हो जाते हैं जिसका महत्व है विकास के लिए, क्योंकि हेल्थ के सवाल हो या एजुकेशन का सवाल हो, ईस्ट एशिया ने तो बहुत पहले समझ लिया है कि इसी के आधार पर विकास हो सकती है। अभी तक हम लोग उसको अभी तक नहीं समझे हैं, इसलिए अभी भी इसकी लड़ाई चल रही है कि ये होना चाहिए कि नहीं, कि क्या स्टैंडर्ड होना चाहिए हेल्थ के लिए, वो साउथ दिल्ली के चिल्ड्रन का होना चाहिए या झारखंड के किसी छोटे गांव का चिल्ड्रन का स्टैंडर्ड होना चाहिए। वो बोलते हैं कि यही स्टैंडर्ड बना दो,
जो हमारे लिए जो अच्छा दिखेगा दुनिया में, कि हमारा नंबर अच्छा दिखना चाहिए, और अगर वो आपने अच्छा नहीं दिखाया, वो आपका जो पब्लिकेशन है उसको वो बंद कर देते हैं, क्योंकि आपने दिखाया कि ये अच्छा नहीं है, हमारे दुनिया के स्टैंडर्ड में हम लोग इतने अच्छे नहीं कर रहे हैं। तो इसके साथ साथ ये जो अधिकार खत्म कर रहे हैं, वो सिर्फ यहाँ नहीं, दुनिया के कई और देशों में हो रहा है, टर्की में हो रहा है, अमेरिका में भी अभी हो रहा है। ये आपका अधिकार नहीं है। जब तक आप इस सरकार के तरीके से नहीं बोलेंगे, तो आपका कोई अधिकार नहीं है। आपका पढ़ने का भी अधिकार नहीं है, कोई और अधिकार नहीं है। जो थोड़ा सा ओबामा ने किया था कि लोगों को जिनके पास आमदनी नहीं है उनके लिए भी हेल्थ केयर मिले, वो भी खत्म कर रहे हैं। तो इसका मतलब है कि ये सिर्फ हमारे देश में नहीं है, कि ये जो लोगों की अधिकार खत्म करके उनको लाभार्थी बनाना, जिसके हम या तो कभी दे सकते हैं या बंद भी कर सकते हैं, ये एक राइट विंग अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म का एक हिस्सा है, उसका एक पार्ट है, कि लोगों का अधिकार खत्म करो, और हम जो देंगे, हम जो कहेंगे, उसी के कहने पर और उसी के आधार पर वो चल सकता है। ये हमारे स्कूल और कॉलेज में भी हो रहा है, क्योंकि अभी अगर आप अप्लाई करेंगे, तो आपको वो देखेंगे कि आपका प्रपोजल कैसा है, वो सरकार के जरूरत के मुताबिक, या सरकार जो एजेंडा बना रहा है उसके एजेंडा के आधार पर बना हुआ है कि नहीं, या आपका कोई और अधिकार एजेंडा अलग है। जो डू यू वांट टू बी क्रिटिकल, आप क्रिटिसाइज करना चाहते हैं, तो आपको वो ग्रांट भी नहीं मिलेगा। और अगर कुछ गलती से कभी कभी मिल जाता है, तो उसको वो पब्लिश नहीं करने देंगे। तो इस प्रकार की जो अधिकार खत्म करके, और उनके अपने वो विकास बिना बिना अधिकार के, वो उनका रास्ता है, ये बन जाता है अथॉरिटेरियन का एक गढ़, कि लोग का विकास भी हो, मगर उसमें सम काइंड ऑफ विकास, कुछ विकास हो, मगर उसमें अधिकार के एक कोई हिस्सा नहीं होना चाहिए। तो इसलिए मैं अचिन का जो कहना था, मैं उसको थोड़ा सा आगे एक और बढ़ा दिया हूँ, कि इसका एक राजनीतिक पहलू बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, कि अधिकार खत्म करना का मतलब है कि अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म को और मजबूत करना। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Dev, and thank you, Nitya. I think we can have some questions. I don't know if there are questions from the chats online. No? Should we start from there or first from here? Okay. So any questions or comments for that matter? Most welcome. हिंदी में या इंग्लिश में, दोनों चलिए। हाँ, please take the mic.
So I am Neha Prasad, a research scholar from Ranchi University. I just want to ask one question, that a policy or scheme is as good as it gets implemented on ground. And there are huge gaps in implementation in rural area and in urban area. How would we
Yeah, that is actually, thank you for the question. That is exactly, I was trying to look at. That is, it doesn't stop there. So when you see that there is a policy and it's not being implemented, then what kind of question do we ask? It could be that the policy design itself might be wrong, which means that the policy is designed in such a way that it can't be successful. Okay. I mean, there are, number of policies you can you can see that. So that's the first thing. That is, first we have to check that whether the policy design is okay or not. And then the policy design is fine. And in my conditional cash transfer Konashik case, actually, policy design is fine. And there is evidence that it works. It can be successful in other states, but still it didn't work here. Then why? So what you are asking is that it could be, as I said, that it could be political intention, that is political will, that those who are implementing, there could be a variety of political issues here. Just think about it, that, sometimes that a policy actually changes the class structure in the village economy. Okay. That means some classes, they're powerful and they control other classes. And then because of a policy intervention, if that is implemented properly, then you could see that some reconfiguration of the classes. Now, in that case, those classes will resist that. So this is one kind of political economy. Another kind of political economy could be that even the local, gram panchayats. Now, the gram panchayats may not have an incentive to implement that properly. Why? Because, either they are not getting any return from that by, good implementation of that. So what I'm saying is that those policies where actually you could see some kind of convergence between the politicians' incentive and the poor, the deprived people's opportunities, then only you see that these things work. Otherwise, most of these policies, they don't work fully because of either of these things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No right, no left, सीधी बात कर। यहीं से बात कर। सर, मैं आपका एक रिव्यू पेपर था 2000 में आपने लिखा है, उसका एक पोर्शन मुझे यहाँ देखने को मिला, और वहाँ पे जो आपने लिखा है सेन, प्रोफेसर सेन को रेफर करके कि डिओंटोलॉजिकल फ्रेमवर्क से हमको स्ट्रेस देना चाहिए कॉन्सिक्वेंस सेंसिटिव सिस्टम पे, ठीक है। और प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि अगर हम ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट रिपोर्ट को, आप जहां मेंशन किया, ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट की बात कर रहे हैं और राइट्स की बात कर रहे हैं, तो दोनों में समानता ज्यादा समझते हैं लोग, उसमें विभेद नहीं कर पाते हैं। क्योंकि अगर हम लिबर्टी और फ्रीडम की बात करें, राइट्स की बात करें, तो हम राइट्स, डेमोक्रेटिक राइट्स को और हमारा जो ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट का कंपोनेंट है, इकोनॉमिक इश्यूज है, सोशल इश्यूज है, दोनों को आप अलग नहीं कर सकते। तो मुझे जो लगता है कि पॉलिसी मेकर्स बेसिक ये चीज में थोड़ा सा उन लोग को आज भी, चाहे वो 2000 में आपने लिखा है वो पेपर, उस वक्त भी प्रॉब्लम था कि पॉलिसी मेकर्स समझ नहीं पाते हैं कि वो राइट्स और जो हमारा डेवलपमेंट इश्यूज दोनों अलग नहीं है। बेसिक मुझे लगता है ये प्रॉब्लम है सर। आपका रिमार्क सर।
Thank you very much, sir, for raising this issue. And you are talking about it's a review of Human Development Report 2000. It was published in EPW 25 years ago. Okay. And you have rightly said that the focus of that report was human development and rights. So rights in human development or something like that. And there, in fact, Amartya Sen takes a very specific position on rights, right? Because libertarian rights says that rights actually should take the priority over other consequences. But Amartya Sen actually changes the discourse, and Amartya Sen's point is that rights realization is one of the dimensions of your achievement, and is a kind of consequence-sensitive rights realization. So that's the kind of it, and you have rightly put it that way. So the point is that rights, once it is legislated, and Amartya Sen again, I'm with Amartya Sen on that. Once it is legislated, then our business doesn't stop there, right? So a right could be, now we can see that. Right to Education Act, now it looks like that we are going backward to some extent. So after legislation, so rights language actually can give you some instrument to further fight for that. So it's ultimately, it's a matter of moral right rather than legislated right. We don't have any right on health, right? There's no right to health, but we have right to education, right? Yeah, elementary education. So because of this complexity, that means rights language, if you don't specify the duty bearers, and that I learned from Zodres's work on this probe report long back, probe report on education. And there they mention specifically that you have to identify the duty bearers. Then only rights are realizable. Otherwise, it's vacuous. You have legislated a right, but you have not specified the duty bearers. If you read that, Right to Education Act, you see that what is the role of the teachers? What is the duty of the parents? What are the duties of the local government, etc. So all the duty bearers are well specified, and they're responsible for that. So that's a well legislated right document, right? But in other areas, it may not be possible that way. So that's why, rights have limitations that way.
Okay, I think we'll take one question online.
Former director of ISEC Bengaluru. I am just allowing him to speak. Professor Deshpande, if you could please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It was a very nice thing to hear to both Jandres as well as Achin, a good friend of mine. There is one thing which is a strong misnomer going on in our academic circle, what we call it as public policy. When public is not present in the policy, calling it as public policy is simply cheating people. I give some examples of this public policy because I was involved in the ringside view of quite a few policies in the earlier governments. We had this.
Okay. Is there any other online question we should take?
Can
from
I
the
can I
chat
go
box?
ahead or I stop?
Yeah.
Can I go ahead or I
Why
stop?
don't you read them together and then we'll ask Achin to respond. Yeah, in one go. In one go. Yeah. Okay.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Can I go ahead or I stop?
I'll talk to Professor Deshpande and ask him.
Hello?
To us.
Hello? Can I go ahead? Hello?
So Pratima Yadav has asked a question: how to use AI in healthcare and education to improve the
Hello?
healthcare workers and educators productively? Then we have a question from Ravindranath Mehto, who said that I would like to draw your attention to some cash transfer schemes. For example, when the government promises farmers to double their income, it comes up with the PM Kisan Yojana with an annual transfer of rupees 6,000. Similarly, the current government in Jharkhand won the elections by launching the Maya Saman Yojana with some monthly cash transfer to women. What economics and politics
most of the policies framed
and
right
Ms.
from
Talat
independence
Naz has
onwards,
asked, in this
most
era of political crisis in India,
have
how can we
always been
expect that these mentioned
framed
basic
in
issues would be
isolation from
resolved?
public.
As a scholar
Whether
from
they wanted
economics
it or
department
not
and a
was
professional,
immaterial.
what should be our
I give
contribution,
you example,
as we are not
4
even allowed to do
examples.
research
One,
proposing
the
critical
soil
analysis of
conservation
any
policy
policy?
during
Kindly
Nehru era.
explain.
Second, the MFAL and SFDA policy in the 60s, 70s. Then the agroclimatic regional planning.
Thank you for your questions. The first question
Second
about
one is
application of AI, I have
MFAL,
absolutely no
marginal
knowledge
farmers
about
and
that.
agricultural laborers,
Application of AI to healthcare and education.
policy.
I have zero
Third one
knowledge on
is
that.
IRDP.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Fourth
Second
one
one,
is,
that
all these
cash
have
transfer
failed,
question.
totally.
That, yeah, there is. I
Fourth
mean,
one
it's important
is
question that
agroclimatic
when you say
regional
that
planning
you
by
want
Professor
to
Alarpur
double
led it,
farmers'
and I worked
income,
in it.
and all you do actually PM
Fifth
Kishan,
one
that is 6,000
is
rupees per year.
Rashtriya Krishi
Now,
Vikas
if you look at
Yojana,
that document, that
which is saying
6,000 rupees
myself
PM
or 4
Kishan
5 of
document,
us
you'll
have drafted
find
in
that
Planning Commission
it
and
says that
implemented it.
it will help them to
And
diversify
the
their crop.
last
It's a crop
one is
diversification,
present is
incentive for
guarantee
crop
system.
diversification. Now, whether that
All
crop
these are
diversification
independent
will
of public,
double your income or not,
cannot
they're
be called as
silent on
public
that.
policies.
And
We are
most of
cheating
them,
people
as
by calling
usual,
it as
they
public
haven't
policy.
changed their
They were
cropping pattern at
framed
all.
and
Many of the
failed.
studies actually have come up. In
Now,
fact, ICSE
my
sir
question was
commissioned
very
quite a
simple.
few studies on PM
My
Kishan,
question was
and
at
most
the
of the
end.
studies show that nothing has happened in
If the
terms of that.
policy
But
makers
I'm not
frame this
against cash
policy
transfer, but cash transfer should be
lot of
universal
government
rather than,
funds.
specific to certain
Who is
occupations like this.
accountable
Yeah.
for these
Thank you.
funds? For example,
Yeah.
agroclimatic regional planning, we have spent about
which I wanted
3,000
from you.
crores.
In sociology, we generally
3,000
interpret in
crores.
terms of
And today,
normative
not
and
even a word
existential.
of it is done.
And we also say, like, the
Who is responsible for
less
that
the
3,000
gap, like,
crores?
there will be harmony, and more the gap
Thank
between the normative and existential, there will be disharmony.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't have an expertise on this existential part of it. In economics, we make a distinction between, economists are usually, they're shallower people. So that's why they look at this question as, normative versus positive. And so by positive, we mean that how things are. and almost like existential, you might say, but it's not. I know that it is not. And so positive means how things are, and normative means how things ought to be. So that is how we make the distinction.
All the policies that, according to him, that we mentioned is they have been framed in isolation from public. He has been part of these policy framing, IRDP, agroclimatic regional planning, and they have a Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, guarantee system. They have been completely independent from public and in isolation. So his question is, if the policymakers frame policies using a lot of funds, who is accountable?
Yeah. Professor Deshpande, nice to hear from you, and it's a great question. And I mean, from your experience, you know that this policy making, we talk about evidence-based policy, and that evidence should come from people. I mean, how people behave and things like that. But even the evidence is often ignored. And but you are saying something even more than that. That is, are we consulting the people when we make policies for people? Now that you know that we are far from that. Thank you for your question.
Okay, we'll take one more question from here, and then we'll try to conclude, I think. Yes, please.
Thank you. I have a question. Like, if you see Jharkhand, the nutrition point of view, the Jharkhand is rich in nutrition. The leaves, the vegetables, the forest fringe people, they have actually taking the food which is very, very, very nutritious. We have also a nutrition mission over there. Since we are talking about policy, so the mission is there, the people are there, the health, if you see the health part, the folic acid, the iron, the calcium, everything is there, the supply of the medicines from the conception of child till the child becomes 6 months old. So everything is there. Then where is again the problem? So why the nutrition status is not getting higher, or they actually evidence is there, as you told, the evidence based policy. The evidence is there. The Jharkhand people are the nutritional level is low, and the policymaker also consult the people, and the policies are also designed in the way. So again, there is a gap. Where is it?
No, actually, I mean, for every, specific policy, I cannot answer offhand unless I do the research on that. But I just try to provide a kind of general framework that in most cases, actually, you could either see that, maybe the normative importance is fine. And as you were saying, that everyone understands the importance of that. Even the policy makers, they consult people on that, and everyone agrees that it's a good thing, but it doesn't happen. So in other words, this agreement on this normative or ethical importance of the policy, that part is okay, that no one will object to that it is not important, nobody will say that. But the next part is more difficult. That is whether the and whether the relevant people, the stakeholders, they have the incentive to push it on. I mean, like, because I think that in most cases you'll find even the quality issues in government schools. Same kind of story. The money is there, the teachers are there, but still you see that the quality. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. Sure.
और हमने आपको बहुत सारे उदाहरण दिखा दिए. अब हम जो बोल रहे हैं वो कंट्रोवर्शियल है, पर बोलेंगे.
I'd simply request you, have you ever tried to correlate these policies to the kind of social movement that we had earlier, democratic mass movement, whether it is dampened it or it has flourished, whether particularly with regard to the caste aspect movement, whether it is directed to just to bring them, because earlier, before that, The men were main actors, and their role was to the bed earners. They have been involved just to just keep them mum. So that earlier any kind of movement that is raised, the women used to come forward. Right. Now women are involved, so the movement is dampened. So that is also, I think, have you ever tried to see this?
क्वेश्चन और ले लेंगे आप भी भगत सर भी लाइन पे स्पीकर पे मैं
So what is this?
सर बोलिए सर
Yeah.
So thank you. I think it's nice listening to you.
Thank you.
A very excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I come from Dumka and I am very much attached with Achin. So, how the goals can be localized? How can we fix the goals locally? So we are talking about the universal goal or national goal. I mean, that corresponds what I have observed in Jharkhand.
Right.
And what Achin has said, the point I like to emphasize, the unintended consequences.
Yes.
Around
Right.
so as the income is rising and people are migrating, who is going to do animal husbandry? So animal husbandry is a casualty.
Right.
Childhood arm over the now all these trees are getting
Yes.
unintended consequences of development.
Yes.
Locally, and so the decentralization and democracy
Yes.
becomes very important.
Yes.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bhagat. Thank you. I fully agree with you that, the goal setting that itself, and India is a huge country, and we need to have local goals. Apart from the so-called SDGs, we can think about these local goals on sustainability and other issues. Because even in the SDGs, you see that the sustainability is there. But how that sustainability actually can takes particular form, that depends on the local context, right? Because sustainability cannot have, you cannot think about sustainability for the whole country as a whole, right? It has to be locally sensitized. But those things, I think we need to work out. We don't have very clear, we don't have clarity on that. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that
last of the last questions.
No, sir, I had a question. I'll reply.
I'm Sucharita. I'm a research scholar actually. I'm Sucharita. I'm research scholar. Actually, I don't know ये कितना इस ये जो अभी जो डिस्कशन के साथ कितना रेलिवेंट आई डोंट नो एक्चुअली झारखंड का जो लैंड डिस्प्लेसमेंट एंड माइग्रेशन इट्स आई मतलब देयर इज वेरी लिटिल लिटरेचर ऑन इट ओके बट ये एक्चुअली मैं जब रियलिटी में वहां पे जाके जब काम किया बेसिकली मैं कुछ दिन पहले हजारीबाग में विजिट की हूँ वहाँ पे एनटीपीसी एंड अदानी पावर ठीक है वहाँ पे 2 फैक्ट्री चल रहा है एनटीपीसी तो पहले से है एंड नाउ अदानी पावर कुछ दिन पहले से वहाँ पे काम करना स्टार्ट किया तो जो हम लोग जो पीपल का वॉइस को लेके अभी बातचीत हो रही है यहाँ पे बट एक्चुअली देखा जाएगा तो गवर्नमेंट एंड दैट कंपनी दोनों जो पीपल का जो वॉइस है उसको समहाउ वो आई डोंट नो कितना ये रेलिवेंट है पता नहीं बट एक्चुअली उसको दबाने का कोशिश हो रहा है तो इसके लिए ऐसा कुछ पॉलिसीज है या कुछ जो ये जो लैंड डिस्प्लेसमेंट एंड माइग्रेशन का जो इशू चल रहा है अभी एंड ये आई थिंक ये बढ़ते जा रहा है बाहर से कंपनियां आके यहाँ पे माइनिंग हो रहा है एंड जो लोकल पीपल का जो राइट्स है उनको बहुत सारा जो उनके इंसेंटिव्स प्रोवाइड करने का बातचीत हो रहा है बट एक्चुअली रियलिटी में वो नहीं हो रहा है जो हायर अथॉरिटी हायर पोस्ट जो है उस कंपनी में वो बाहर के लोग यहाँ पे काम कर रहे हैं बेसिकली एज ए गार्ड एंड जो लोकल पोस्ट में लोकल पीपल को दे रहा है एंड डे बाय डे ना वो उनको डिस्प्लेसमेंट के लिए उनको फोर्स किया जा रहा है जे अभी आप यहाँ से जाइए आपको रिहेबिलिटेशन का मतलब उनको आशा देकर जे हाँ ठीक है आपको दूसरी जगह में शिफ्ट किया जाएगा बट एक्चुअली वो रियलिटी में नहीं हो रहा है एंड जो लोग उसको लेके वॉइस कर रहे हैं उनको अरेस्ट किया जा रहा है एंड उसको अंदर जेल के अंदर दिया तो इस सिचुएशन को मतलब पॉलिसी
ऐसे थ्रू पॉलिसीज को कैसे मतलब इसको कैसे चेक किया जाएगा, आई डोंट नो। मतलब एक दैट्स व्हाई मैं पहले बोल रही हूँ कि आई डोंट नो कितना रेलिवेंट है इस सिचुएशन में क्वेश्चंस, बट हाँ थोड़ा सा मेरे को आया दिमाग में जे आई डोंट, इसको कैसे चेक किया जा सकता है। तो
So Devnathan, in fact, pushed my point towards that direction, that, ultimately it's a matter of that kind of political economy where, people are evicted from their land and land grabbing and all these things. So I didn't get into that explicitly here, but, I presented a broad framework. I think that your question on this social movement, I think that's also extremely relevant. And that's why, we often talk about Kerala, public action and things like that. So here my focus is human development. And on human development, what you can see is that you can organize certain movements against some kind of discrimination, some kind of immediate deprivation, or, immediate, like, losing land and that kind of thing. It's easier to organize that movement. But movement, sustained movement on healthcare issues and education, it's very difficult to sustain that. So that's the paradox in our democracy. That is, Amartya Sen also talks about that in our democracy, social movements actually, I mean, if it could be, price of or procurement price or, minimum support price and all, you can make the movement because it's a similar kind of interest and there. But when it comes to this improving the publicly provided health care, nobody will come with you, to fight for that. I mean, it's too abstract for them, right? I mean, so that is something that, we don't have any answer to that. But in your case, it's a direct, what Professor Devnathan actually suggested, that, direct political question, actually. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's interesting that most of the questions were about specific policies and what to do about this, what to do about that, which reflects a kind of expectation, I think, that researchers should come up with solutions. Actually, we are not at all well trained for that. And your talk was not about specific policies. I think it was, in fact, precisely about the process of policy formation and why we are going about it in a wrong way quite often. And what I understand from what you said is that you are basically criticizing a certain way of approaching policy where we set certain targets and then we look for some levers to activate these, to reach these targets. And often it doesn't happen that way because we have misunderstood the process, because there are unintended consequences, or because there are conflicts between the different targets and so on. Perfectly right. I agree with that. And I think this is a part of what I see as a very naive understanding of policymaking in academia, not just in economics. And I would even say, if I can say that even in your talk, I could see some traces of that. For example, when you mentioned, you listed 3 reasons why policies might go wrong. You didn't mention one of the main reasons, which is that the government comes under the wrong influences. For example, of corporate power. And this is why the question that Sucharita posed is a very excellent question. She's looking at a particular situation where Adani comes with his billions of dollars and he's able to sway the government and these people have no voice. So now I see all this as an aspect of a larger misunderstanding of policymaking in academia. And one symptom of that is this very strange expression of evidence-based policy. Evidence is one thing. Policy is a completely different thing. Evidence is about the facts. Now, you can debate whether there is such a thing as objectivity and so on and so forth. We can go into all that, but basically it's an attempt to ascertain the facts. Policy is a political decision, and it requires in particular values and priorities, and that doesn't come from research. I mean, that comes from deliberation. I think if you're serious about policies and about research leading to some kind of policy, we have to deliberate, including deliberate with people from other disciplines, and we have to engage with people who are working for change. There's this delusion in academia that by doing research, we are influencing policy. Many research papers end with a section called Policy Implications. And if you read that section carefully, in most of the cases, I can guarantee that the implications, the so-called implications, don't follow from the research.
Yeah.
For the precise reason that you need more than research to believe the policy advice. Policy making, in my experience, because I've been involved in some attempts to influence policy in India, is a political battle, and sometimes a very bitter battle. We can contribute to that through research, certainly, so research has a role, but it's more than that. And I think if we are serious about our research contributing to policy making, then we have to go beyond that and engage with a process of change. So then I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm just trying to put it differently and take it forward. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. I think we can for ourselves all and for the speaker in particular. Sorry? It was thanks. Yeah, please. Yes, Devika.
Good evening, everyone. It's my great honor to deliver the vote of thanks at the conclusion of today's thought-provoking seminar. On behalf of IHD ERC, I extend our deepest gratitude to Professor Achin Chakraborty for delivering an insightful lecture that deepened our understanding of the political economy of health and human development. His analysis of public-private dynamics, health expenditure, and the broader institutional context has provided us with invaluable perspectives that will resonate in our academic and policy discussions going forward, sir. We are equally grateful to Professor Jean-Dres for graciously chairing this session. His long-standing contributions to development economics and public policy have enriched today's dialogue and helped us appreciate the larger context in which these issues are situated. I would also like to thank Professor Devnathan and Professor Nitya Rao for gracing us with their presence and also for their very valuable insights and comments on the lecture. I would like to thank all the participants, students, researchers, faculty, and guests for their active engagement and thoughtful questions who contributed to the success of this event. I would especially like to thank all the online participants for such a huge participation. We had over 800 registrations online, and we have a huge participation rate that came online. And this has been very overwhelming for us. This is just the beginning of our seminar series, and we would continue it and make it on a regular basis. So we would like all of you to be part of it regularly for us in our forthcoming sessions as well. Special thanks to the organizing team, technical support staff, and everyone behind the scenes who worked tirelessly to make this seminar smooth and impactful. Special thanks to Rana sir for inviting Achin sir to our institute, Ashwini Bhaiya for such a seamless coordination, Amit Bhaiya for all our team and all our team members for their help and support. Last but not the least, I would like to thank our CEO, Priyanka Di, for coming all the way from Delhi and rescheduling her appointments for us and be here for us like a pillar. I would also like to thank our director, sir, Alak sir, for making this event such a huge success and always pushing us to strive to be our best versions and to keep moving forward. We hope to continue these very important conversations in future. Thank you once again for being part of today's event. Yes, there is some tea and snacks on the terrace for all of us. Please, I would like you all to join. And the last word, please, from our CEO, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Devika. So thank you all. I'm just taking the last word. There have been technical snags and stuff, but we have recorded this. We are putting a better version of this video online. So all the deliberations, the enriching deliberations that have taken place here will be live on YouTube very shortly and will be shared with all of you. Thank you all. Keep encouraging us with your participation. Please join us for tea and snacks right on the terrace up there. Thank you so much. See you at the seminars that I always say.
आप लोग भी सजेस्ट कर सकते हैं कभी कि लोकली भी हम लोग ऑर्गेनाइज कर सकते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है कि हमेशा बाहर से ही कोई आएंगे, लोकली भी हम लोग कर सकते हैं।